This episode of the Elevate Your Leadership podcast is brought to you in part by iFly Virginia Beach Indoor Skydiving. At iFly Virginia Beach, we bring people together through the dream of flight. To learn more about our leadership development and team building, visit iflyvirginiabeach.com.
Welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast series with U.S. Navy Special Operations veteran, CEO, and hockey fanatic Bob Pizzini. Bob discusses leadership, success, failure, defining moments, and hard lessons learned with guests who are intentional in their approach to leadership. Leadership is a perishable skill. Use it or lose it. In this series, entrepreneurs, industry executives, academics, public figures, and other highly effective professionals share their formulas for success with you.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Elevate Your Leadership with me, your host, Bob Pizzini. I love to have leadership discussions with people who not only bring great value to me and my organization, but these are people who I know will bring great value to you and your organization. Today's guest is Mr. Bryan Stephens, President and CEO of the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce. Now, before I read Bryan's bio, I just want to say that I've known Bryan personally for about 8 years. We have similar backgrounds in the fact that we both served very long careers in the military, but I've seen Bryan lead this chamber over the last 8 years since I became a member of the business community, and his leadership is stellar. And it enables organizations to flourish. And we're going to flush that out throughout our discussion. Here's Bryan's bio. Mr. Stephens has extensive leadership and business experience. Prior to assuming his current position, he served as president and CEO of Kalmar in San Antonio, Texas, a $250 million a year manufacturer of material handling equipment, after serving a distinguished 28-year career in the U.S. Army, retiring as a colonel. In the Army, he served in a variety of progressive operational leadership and command positions. His last assignments include Infantry Brigade Commander and Division Chief of Staff, 10th Mountain Division, Fort Drum, New York, and Chief of Operations and Chief of Staff, Joint Warfighting Center, U.S. Joint Forces Command in Suffolk, Virginia. His military qualifications include, among others, Ranger, Airborne, Pathfinder, Air Assault, and Joint Staff Officer. And for those of you who are not familiar with those qualifications, that's the real deal. Those are all very challenging to earn along the way, and Bryan will tell us a little bit about that. Since taking the helm of the Hampton Roads Chamber, Mr. Stephens has led the chamber to a U.S. Chamber of Commerce 5-star accreditation, an achievement only obtained by the top 1% of the over 7,200 chambers in the nation. In 2016, he was awarded the Chamber Executive of the Year for the Commonwealth of Virginia by the Virginia Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. And in 2017 and 2018, he was number 15 on Inside Business's top 25 most powerful people in Hampton Roads. In 2019, 2020, and 2021, Mr. Stephens was recognized on Inside Business's top 25 list, while also being on the Virginia 500 Power List for Economic Development. Welcome, Bryan Stephens.
Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate that. I've got to say, you read that bio just like my mother wrote it.
There's a lot in there. I mean, I wasn't even planning on asking questions and discussing your bio, but tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a Ranger, for example.
Before I do, Bob, I just want to thank you for the kind invitation for me to participate in your podcast. I have listened to many of them, and I know that you invite some really powerful leaders to participate in these podcasts. And so to be invited to be one of them is a distinct honor for me. So I really appreciate it, Bob. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome, Bryan. This has been a long time coming, actually, and I'm glad we're able to finally put it together. So before we hit all the ins and outs of leadership, tell us about what your Ranger career was like.
Well, I was afforded an opportunity by way of a Army ROTC scholarship to go to college. And that was really the only way I could go to college. My parents couldn't afford it. I certainly wasn't academically positioned to get a scholarship. And so I was able to get an Army ROTC scholarship. And once I got into Army ROTC, I learned very early that I wanted to take on the toughest of toughest challenges. And so airborne, Ranger, Pathfinder, that was my path early on. And so I worked hard in college to prepare for that. Once I got commissioned as second lieutenant, I was fortunate enough to be commissioned as a light infantryman and was able to pursue those initial career goals to take on the toughest challenges that the Army had to offer. And quite frankly, that was Ranger School.
Okay. I would imagine by taking on those very challenging assignments and a very challenging career, that immediately led to leadership development, and it probably helped you chart a way forward. Early in your career, did you decide that you wanted to, continue the Pathfinder route, the air assault route, or kind of how did that progress?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I was first commissioned, my intent was to pay back my 4 years of active duty and then go on and do something else, like go to law school or find something else. But once I got into the Army, I found out I really loved it. I mean, I found it a distinct honor for me to wear our nation's cloth, and to lead men and women was one of the greatest honors that anybody could have. And to pursue the light infantry career path and lead soldiers was something that was my passion. As far as a leadership perspective, what I found out was that being in the military, no matter what service, is one of the greatest leadership crucibles that you can do. I mean, because leadership in the military is paramount to mission accomplishment, taking care of your men and women and those type of things. And you learn that early on. And a great deal of your success in the military is based on your ability to demonstrate those leadership capabilities.
When I enlisted in the Navy, same thing. I was going to do 4 years and move on. I just wanted to be a Navy diver. I grew up watching the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, black and white, and then in Technicolor. And I just wanted to be a Navy diver. And I discovered I loved serving my country as you did. I loved wearing the uniform, and I loved being a member of a team that had a serious mission. I love being a member of a team that was, traveling the world doing big things. Transitioning from your military career into the Chamber of Commerce and all these accolades within the Chamber, I mean, immediately, as soon as you got to the Chamber, you win 5-star accreditation. Was that within like your first year, your second year?
I think it was the second year, Bob. Yeah.
All right. So that's indicative of leadership unto itself. 7,200 chambers of commerce in the nation, and your second year at the helm, you achieve 5-star accreditation. What would you attribute that significant early success to?
Well, a couple of things. One, throughout my military career, and then I transitioned into the business community, as you said, down in San Antonio, Texas, and then back here to Hampton Roads with the Chamber. I've always set a standard for my organizations, no matter what organizations I'm a member of. And that standard is excellence. Every organization, whatever industry, usually has industry standards for excellence. When I was in the military, you've got task condition standards, you've got, RTEPs, you've got IG inspections and all that. So I always tried to train my soldiers to achieve that standard of excellence and be the best, whether it's a platoon, company, battalion, brigade, be the best at what they do and take great pride in that. I did the same thing down in San Antonio. It was a manufacturing company. So what are the standards for manufacturing? And then I set goals for the organization, whether it was quality control, whether it was getting the cost of production down, efficiency, effectiveness, or whatever. I set clear conditions for the members of the organization to achieve. So when I got here and took over the Chamber of Commerce, some of my first questions are, well, what are our standards? And quickly realized that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is obviously the organization, the nationwide organization that kind of oversees all of the chambers in a loose fashion, they have specific standards of conduct for local chambers of commerce. There's 9 specific criteria. And so I reached out to the U.S. Chamber. I got those 9 standards. And then I pulled the staff together and I said, look, is this something we want to do? Do we want to try collectively to attain the high standard of excellence that a 5-star accredited chamber has to achieve? And they all said, yes, let's do it. Nobody has asked us to do this before. And subjecting yourself to U.S. Chamber evaluation is voluntary. No chamber has to do it. It's a voluntary. So we volunteered, and we worked hard for a year preparing for it and putting the processes, procedures, and systems in place, ensuring that we had the right documentation, ensuring that we were meeting the needs of the business community in Hampton Roads. We subjected ourselves to the evaluation, and we were very fortunate to get it. So the bottom line is it was a staff effort. It was a team effort. The staff went to work, put in a lot of hours to achieve the standards in their particular areas. And again, I couldn't be so proud, because what that 5-star accreditation means is that operationally, we're in the top 1% of all chambers in the nation. And I think that's important, because I think our members and the business community in Hampton Roads writ large, they want the best chamber in the nation representing them. And we are certainly one of those. And again, I contributed all to the fabulous staff that we have.
The fabulous staff, obviously served by great leadership as well. But I have to agree with your fabulous staff. You know, I've interacted with the chamber team for 8 or 9 years now, and everything is first class, whether it's a leadership exchange to Colorado or to Raleigh, Durham, or I know we have a leadership exchange coming up in Charlotte, to the State of the City series, to the Small Business of the Year awards, to the welcoming new businesses and new CEOs. The chamber staff is so engaged, and everything they do is truly first class product across the board. How many people on the chamber staff?
Total, I think there's about 20 right now. So it's not a large staff. But having said that, in the chamber world, it is a pretty large staff. Most chambers are much smaller. They're 3, 4, 5, 6 people. I think the chamber RVA up in Richmond has about 10 people. And so we've got about 18 or 20 here. We also, as you know, have affiliates. We have a sports commission. We have a small business development center, and we have Volunteer Hampton Roads, which is all part of the chamber now as well. So we have other organizations that are sort of subsets of the chamber. So it makes it more challenging, a little more complex, but I think all the more relevant.
Yeah, it's a big machine. There's no doubt about it. But, you know, I can say that I have personally and professionally benefited from the big machine, right down to the day I had this concept of opening my own business, I Fly Virginia Beach. You know, what did I do? I got a hold of the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce Small Business Development Center. That was the point of entry for me. And, you know, Here we are 8, 9 years later, and I'm a business owner in the community. And I've said this before too, when I left the military, and maybe it was similar for you, you know, when you serve for 28 years, in your case, only 26 for me, I'm a quitter. You know, I punched out at 26, but when you leave a profession after that long, there's a void, there's an absence of your teammates, of your duty, of your commitment, of having a really well-defined reason to get up every day. And the chamber has largely filled that void in my case. And I didn't seek that. It just happened. It was discovery throughout the course of my business career. And it's been just an incredible experience. As you transition military to manufacturing to Chamber of Commerce, let's talk about how you led. For example, when I left the military, when I truly had my own business, 35, 40 employees, I had to go through this learning curve to really redesign my leadership. You know, not all military principles of leadership apply in the private sector. And certainly there are private sector principles of leadership that do apply in military situations. But just tell us about your transition in leadership there a little bit. Any discovery along the way?
Oh, of course, Bob. And that's a great question. Military to civilian transition is a tough one. And it gets tougher the longer that you're in the military, like you said. So again, it's finding those common traits and learning the new traits that you need to in the civilian sector. But listen, this is the deal in my mind. Leadership is all about getting things done. Leadership is about accomplishing tasks, accomplishing goals, accomplishing missions to a high standard of excellence, as I was talking about earlier. Now, it can be self-leadership where you've got the self-discipline to get things done yourself. That's self-leadership. Or it could be organizational leadership where you use your staff, guide your staff, lead your staff to accomplish the mission, the goal, the objective to a high standard of excellence. That is the same in the military as it is in the civilian sector. It's all about getting things done. And that's why I say there's the two most important things in the military that's the same in the business world, Bob, is taking care of your people and leadership. They're the two most valuable commodities. When I look to hire people, especially if it's in a vice president or director position, I look at their ability to get things done. I look at their leadership ability. I tell people all the time when I give speeches and stuff, the most valuable commodity in the business community right now is leadership. People are looking for leaders to join their organization, again, because leaders know how to get the job done and they know how to take care of people along the way. Now, as far as leadership styles go, obviously the military is a little more authoritative because you're wearing rank usually, and you've got subordinates that recognize that rank. You can be directive in your approach. And again, my leadership style on a military installation was a lot different than my leadership style in combat, right? I mean, because things are a little more serious, a little more urgent. You got to get things done, and people have to know that you mean business.
Yep.
And so you got to adjust your leadership style. So it's by my experience in the military with that, I learned situational leadership. I learned that you had to adjust your leadership style to your situation and to your environment. So getting back to military to civilian transition, you have to, first of all, understand your environment. My environment in San Antonio running a manufacturing company was a lot different than the environment leading soldiers in combat. I mean, it's just completely different. So having that, what I call sensory acuity, having that awareness of your environment, knowing your people, knowing what the job is, and adjusting your leadership style accordingly to the same end state, getting the job done to a high standard of excellence, but you've got to adjust that leadership style to the situation. You know, that takes what I call some intent. You got to be intentful about your leadership style. You need to understand, again, your people and your environment and be sensitive to that. The other thing that I would say, I got to mention, Bob, because I think it's so important. No matter what your leadership style, in my opinion, you have to be a selfless leader. Leadership is not about self. Leadership is about your people, and leadership is about the organization. So if you find yourself trying to do things or get other people to do things for a self-centered reason, you're wrong. I'm telling you, you're just wrong. And so leadership to me is about servitude. It's about giving back to the organization now, giving back to the chamber, giving back to our members, giving back to the business community, giving back to the quality of life of the region. That's what it's all about for me. And that's why I enjoy this job so much, because it's about giving. It's not about receiving.
I think you just gave us your definition of leadership. So I won't, that was next on my queue here to ask you how you define it, but I think you just did that. I have to say, so you talk about, leadership is about giving. It's not about self or self-interest. In the Navy, we would say shipmate, self in that order, right? That's where the focus of your efforts, and that's where your priority goes. That's where your commitment goes. In business, it's very similar. Business, teammates, self. Self-interest is okay, but it's certainly not the first thing on the list.
In the Army, Bob, we used to say mission first, people always. What that meant is, you've got to accomplish the mission, but at the same time, you've got to take care of your people.
Yeah, without a doubt. I was reading a book recently by Marty Strong. Do you know Marty, by the way?
No, I don't.
CEO of Lynx. Okay. He's a retired Navy SEAL, but I was reading a book he wrote called Be Visionary. And this guy's got a very interesting life, but he's a retired Navy SEAL. Then he became an investment advisor, and then he became a CEO. But when he was an investment advisor, the companies that he would have people invest in, he would research their companies and he would look at the leadership of the organization. If they were strategic thinkers and people who took care of their people, he recommended investing in those organizations, as opposed to, CEOs and leadership who just want to be efficient and, the Deming model and cut costs, and, cut costs means cutting people and all the other stuff. He looked at organizations that took care of their people, and he found those organizations to be great investments overall. So you talked about situational leadership, kind of that adaptability, right? Recognizing the situation that's in front of you. One of the things that I noticed, and I had to, again, go through a learning curve, is in the military, even different services or different levels within different organizations, everybody in the military has gone to boot camp or some basic form of training. So regardless if me as a sailor gets a soldier assigned to me for whatever mission, whatever reason, even though we've never worked together before, we haven't gone to the same basic training, we've gone to basic training. And this basic level of expectation is there. What I discovered in the private sector is that doesn't exist. I just expected that, this commonality, this baseline, and it just wasn't there. And so for me, that was a tough learning curve. The 22, 23, 24-year-old in the military is on their second or third leadership assignment. In the private sector, that baseline's not there, and they haven't had that leadership development. Have you experienced that?
Absolutely, I have, Bob. And again, it goes back in my mind to being able to evaluate your environment. An environment in the military is completely different than an environment at Kalmar and the environment at the chamber. And so you've got to evaluate your environment and adjust your leadership style according to get the job done. And that's what I think the truly great leaders are able to do. You can't take the same leadership style from one environment into another and expect to have the same level of success.
You got to be able to maneuver. You have to adapt to those different situations. In my Elevate Your Leadership presentation, I talk about leadership styles and power types. And when we identify which ones really suit us well, when we're really using them properly, we're maneuvering and we're navigating between all these different leadership styles and power types and keeping ourselves in control the whole time. You talked about leading yourself as an individual and then the organizational leadership, and that's something to layer on top of these leadership styles, knowing what environment you're in, as you previously indicated. Okay, so we're talking about how it's different leading from military to the private sector and how the workforce you have in the private sector is significantly different because they don't have this baseline of military training. Is there a way to baseline people in the private sector? Is there a way to kind of set this common expectation among others? Have you applied any principles along the way there?
Oh, yeah. I think that a leader has to do a couple of things in the context of what you're talking about, Bob. First of all, they've got to be able to articulate a vision, whether it's a vision of the organization at large or whether it's a vision of the goal or the task you're trying to accomplish. And then you've got to be able to articulate the standards at which you expect that to be done. And then probably comes the hardest part. You've got to be able to motivate them. You've got to be able to motivate them to willingly want to accomplish the mission to the standard that you have set. And that's the art and science of leadership in my mind, because it's easy just to give somebody a task and forget it. And then when they fail to do it or they do it to a low standard, it's easy to call them into your office and chew them out. That's not leadership, man. That's not leadership at all. Leadership is motivating them to do the job right the first time to the standard that you have set for them.
So create the vision, get them on board with the vision, set a high standard and motivate them to achieve that high standard. And that's not fire and forget, is it? That's something you have to constantly pay close attention to.
Yeah. And there's going to be failures on your team, and that's to be expected, I think. Another leadership principle that I've always had is to counsel in private, praise in public.
Sure.
So when you have an employee that fails to accomplish the mission to whatever standard or whatever happens, it's okay to call them into your office and very professionally have a conversation with them, about why they failed and encourage them to do better next time and all. That's all part of leadership, right? But you do it in private. You don't condone them in public. Conversely, if they knock it out of the park for you, you praise them in front of their peers. You praise them in front of their subordinates. You let them know that you're proud of them. And just saying that word, hey, listen, guys, I am so proud of you. I mean, that has such a big impact on employees you wouldn't believe. If it's done honestly and if it's justified, I think that's a good leadership trait to praise your employees.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, we are going to take a commercial break. Bryan is a good capitalist, just like I am. And we'll be back in just a minute. And we are back. I'm talking with Bryan Stephens, Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce president and CEO. And we left off talking about praising in public and having discussions for improvement or lack of performance in private. And those are necessary discussions to have. Most people, it's been my experience that most people want to do a good job. And when they come up short, they're not happy about that. And they will accept recommendations or a path for improvement. And if those aren't the kind of people you have on your team, then you need to get rid of them and get people of good moral and ethical character on your team. Certainly, I've made many mistakes in the past. I've been sat down by a leader once or twice who said, "What are you doing here?" or "Why'd you do that?" And in retrospect, you slap yourself in the forehead and go, "What was I thinking? Why did I do that? If I could do that one again, I would do it differently." And so as a leader, that's what you look for when your people come up short. There's this discussion, performance versus behavior. And again, we flush this out in the full Elevate Your Leadership experience. But we want high performing, high behaving people on our team. And when you have them, it's like you said, you praise them in public, you let them know they're doing a great job, and you keep them busy because that's what they want to do. And part of that is when they accomplish, when they achieve, they feel reward, and it contributes to high culture because they feel like they're contributing to the mission of the organization, right? They're good at what they do. They're recognized as being good at what they do, and they're making significant contributions. And then the opposite side of that is pretty easy too. If you have low performance, low behavior, it's been my experience that they have to go. In the military, we try and retrain. It's a lot harder to just fire somebody, so to speak, in the military, but low performance, low behavior can become this poison within an organization. I've had experiences where I've had somebody with very high behavior, in other words, high moral and ethical character, wonderful person to have on the team, but they're coming up short performance-wise. And what I try to do now is reassign, retrain, or find something that they can do that contributes overall. That high behavior, that high moral and ethical character, I just find to be the most important quality in a person. And then we'll train them to do whatever it is they need to do. Do you have any experience along those lines?
Thousands of experiences like that. Absolutely. I mean, a person's moral values, character, personality trait, positive personality traits. I mean, those are paramount to every employee. And that's one of my first assessments when I'm looking to hire somebody. You can generally, almost always coach, teach, train people to do the job to the standard you expect them to do. If you're a good leader, you can do that. But you can't go back and very easily teach morals, values, and ethics. I mean, when they're ready to go into the military or when they're ready to go into the labor force, it's kind of hard to train them to do that. So that's absolutely imperative that you're able to quickly analyze a person's characteristical traits as a leader.
We have core values in the military, right? In the Navy, it's honor, courage, commitment. The Army, the pop quiz. What are the Army core values? Selfless service, excellence. A funny story, Bob. When I first went down to Kalmar, I asked my human resource manager how many veterans or military experienced employees we had, and he didn't know at the time. So I asked him to go out and find out. He came back and told me we had like 2%. And I said, let's make a concerted effort as we grow the company and as we have transitioning employees that we focus in on veterans. And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because veterans bring the values to this organization that I'm looking for." And so every hire, we had like 350 employees. So it wasn't that hard for me as the CEO to have an onboarding interview with every new employee. And as we brought veterans on, I had my cheat sheets. So I had the Navy values, the Air Force values, the Army values, and the Marine Corps values. And when I looked at the personnel file, when Bob Pizzini came in and he was going to be one of the workers in the factory, I'd bring him into my office and I'd say, "Well, Bob, you were in the Navy, right?" "Yeah, I was, sir." And I said, "Well, what are the Navy values?" I'd give him that same pop quiz. Now, they generally almost always couldn't recite them, just like I couldn't. But then I would have my cheat sheet on my desk and I would say, well, they're selfless, service, excellent, or whatever. And I'd go through them. And then I'd tell them this. I tell them,
Just because you're out of the Navy does not mean that you should not live up to those values every single day. Those values that the Navy inculcated in you are the same values that I want you to take to the plant floor. Don't ever lose them. Don't lower your values because you're here at this organization. Bring everybody else's values up to yours. And I got to tell you, Bob, over the next year or so, we brought on a large percentage of veterans, and the efficiency, the effectiveness, the morale of the entire organization was raised exponentially. And I attribute that to, again, the values that those new employees brought to the organization.
Sure. It's kind of funny. We get the core values beaten into us, if you will, through officer training or through boot camp or whatever our basic training is. We get them. We just get pummeled with them. And in my case, over the years, it made sense. And over the years, I really paid attention to it and I appreciated it. Just like you said, as I transitioned into the private sector, I took that with me, still honing my core values, still becoming, focusing on honor, courage, and commitment, which are the Navy core values. And then ultimately with my company, I developed 3 core values: loyalty, integrity, and professionalism. And these are the discussions I have with my 35 employees almost on a daily basis. Tell me something that happened today that made you think of a core value, or tell me how you helped a teammate with a core value. But these moral and ethical standards are so important. They just have to be revisited on a regular basis. And I think that's a key component of leadership, is keeping that highly visible with everybody we lead.
No, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I often say that your core values are the foundation of your organization. And I tell employees, when you're at that point of decision and it's hard for you to decide what to do, take a look at the values. And if your decision is not in line with those values, then it's the wrong decision. It's the foundation of an organization's culture.
You are so good at not only articulating that, but you're good at representing that graphically as well. So I have, and to the listeners out there, I have to confess that I have taken Bryan's leadership model of mission, vision, values, culture, and the way he makes that part of the daily business within the chamber. And I've grown my organization in that capacity, and it has worked tremendously, right down to the graphic I just showed you. So folks at home, you can't see, Bryan and I are on a Zoom here, but I just held up Bryan's strategy for 2022, and it's a graphic represented as this building supported by pillars. And here's mine for 2022, which is also represented as this structure supported by pillars. So one thing I love about the military experience is we can plagiarize whatever we want to. You give credit to the author, but there's no copyright on anything, right? So you can take a good idea and run with it. So a lot of fun there.
Absolutely.
All right, we are coming to the end of drive time, of workout time, and coming to the end of our time with Bryan Stephens. Bryan, is there anything that I left out? Is there anything I didn't ask you about, or anything you want to share with our listeners?
Maybe wanted to add one thing, Bob, because it's something that I've been studying about the last 3 or 4 years, and I've read several books on the subject, and that is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is all about how you process things. It's how you react to different things. And emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, this is EQ, you can train yourself to be a high emotional intelligence person. And I think emotional intelligence is really important for a good leader, because a good leader has to control their emotions. They have to process things in a calm and professional manner. They can't lose their temper. They can't be chewing out employees. They've got to treat people with respect and dignity. They've got to put things in context. And the only way to do that is to develop your emotional intelligence. So I would just encourage all of your listeners out there to just pick up a book or Google and read about emotional intelligence and be intentful about how you process things in your life, because we're all going to be bombarded with situations. And it's how you react to those situations that really determine the quality of leader that you are.
Thanks for that, Bryan. And that just falls right in line with the theory that lifelong leaders are lifelong learners. And the space of emotional intelligence It's been around for a while. It's not something brand new, but it is critical importance. So, Bryan Stephens, Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, President and CEO, 28-year retired U.S. Army Colonel, Ranger, Airborne, Pathfinder. You're a man of many accomplishments, and I thank you so much for being on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast today, Bryan.
Well, Bob, I appreciate you. I admire your leadership and all that you've accomplished, both in the military and with your business there at iFly, and quite frankly, how you're addressing your civic responsibilities in the Hampton Roads region as well. You're a true leader. I admire you, and I'm just thankful you're my friend.
Thankful you're my friend. That's a good way to leave it, because I am certainly thankful of that. So we got to hit the links here real quick.
Absolutely, Bob.
All right. Thank you, Bryan.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. To contact Bob directly or to learn more about how Bob can advance you and your organization through leadership training, team building, executive coaching, and public speaking, visit robertpizzini.com. Robert, Pizzini.com, and connect with him on LinkedIn.